Welcome back to McCarthy Performance. Today we will be going through how I set up my F2B Rottler for boring. And the first thing we're going to start with is block prep. Now the F2B Rottler registers off the oil pan rail. So it's very important, as this sits on the fixture, and I'll go over the fixture with you, that this is flat. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can go over it with a file lightly till all the high spots are gone. You can do it with a file. You can go over it with a longboard. You can use an air file, or you could use a stone, which would be something similar like this. And if you're doing engine work, I recommend having about a half a dozen of these, all shapes and sizes and grits. These come in very handy, and they're very nice to have. So we're going to want to make sure that everything's flat as it can be, and you really got to be careful with studs that you don't get a false register on the block, and I'll go over that with you. But your F2B should have a square plate that sits in the fixture, and the block will set on that. So every once in a while I stone the fixture plate and the riser for the F2B, and of course the feet that it all sits on in the machine. You're going to want to be careful. You really want to make sure that your plugs are out for your water jackets. The flush ones don't pose a problem. Most blocks, you just got to make sure that nothing's hanging up. If you use a hex style, they can hang up. Then your block ain't going to sit flat on your fixture, and then you'll be boring crooked holes. Hopefully you won't get that far. If you follow my directions and you're careful, that won't be an issue. With the F2B, it registers, and let's back up here. My F2B has a square plate that this is going to register on. So you want to make sure all your caps are clean. There's no burrs on them, nothing hanging off of them. You always want to make sure that your bar, your flat bar that sets up part of your fixture that goes through the mains, that your oil rear main seal does not hang up on that bar. There's a notch in the bar. You always want to make sure that your rear main seal isn't smaller than your rear main housing or any of your housings. I clean all my caps up, deburr them, and clean them, and I torque the caps up on the engine. When I bore an engine, I do it with all the caps tightened up. That's pretty common knowledge, but if you don't know that, you want to torque your caps up. So this is part of the way that I do it. Might not everybody do it that way. I don't know who does what. I don't really care. I'm just showing you how I do it, and it's foolproof, and it's worked for me. Now this block has already been bored. We have another block off to the side that I'll probably set up, and I'll go through some of that as I set the block on the fixture. But the next part of this video is going to be me addressing the actual fixture of the F2B and how it sits on its feet. That's what I call them on the machine, and how I go through that. Now, Rottler feels that this is the datum point for your block. This is going to be the basis. This is going to be your basement. This is going to be what everything, if you're building a house, what everything's going to be based off of. Well, you can do it that way, or you can do it a different way. And I will show you that. Usually on 4-cylinders and Subarus and little engines like that, I'll set them on my riser blocks. Your F2B should have riser blocks. I'll go over them. I'll sweep the deck with a dial indicator, and I'll shim the block up on the riser blocks until it's 0, and then I'll bore it. So I go off of reference from the deck on a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder. I go off of the actual deck. I don't go off of the oil pan rail. Production use, you can go off of oil pan rails, but they can get you in trouble, because if you believe these is true to the rest of the block, in a perfect world, that would maybe be the case, but chances are it ain't even close. So we'll go over that too. I could make probably 3-4 videos on how to just set the machine up, but I'm going to try to cover the most important things. I've had a couple people ask, and I'm going to make this video. So if you're not interested in an F2B Rottler and how to set it up to bore out a V8 block, probably this won't be the video for you. Hopefully I'll have some videos later that might interest you. This is what this video is going to be about. And thank you for watching, and we'll continue on when I set up the machine. Okay, we're going to talk about the cradle for the Rottler. Now the cradle has got this square frame. That's where your oil pan rails are going to set. You want to make sure that this is flat and clean and free of any burrs. This goes on one way, it's notched out, that's for the bar. It has locating dowels that ride in these slots, and that'll allow you to move it back and forth. You want to make sure that these are free of any burrs or nicks. Now, these bars are, if you have a block that has studs on the mains, and they will, on a big block Chevrolet, they'll bottom out on this Valley tray, pan, whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it a Pontiac, but it's coved in. A lot of times the studs will stop on here. Small block Chevrolet Vortex, big block Chevrolets with standoffs on the original OEM bolts, you'll have to replace them and torque them, because these won't probably get you high enough. So I have them, and of course, again, you want to make sure these are free and clear of any burrs. Or you can do 2-3 blocks. I've done that in the past, where you don't need that much height, and you don't, and these work just fine. Just put them on the corner and make sure they don't slide out when the blocks find center on the flat bar that goes through the mains. Okay, so we're going to get these off here, and of course, for what I'm doing today, I don't need them. But what I do need to know is I do need to know that this is clean and free of any burrs. And I'm going to probably say that more than once. It's so important that everything sits square and flat and true. And the only way you know that is to visually check it with it. Go over it lightly with a stone or a little body block like that, and just kind of run it back and forth. Make sure you don't hear anything making a louder audible sound. It would indicate that it would have a high spot on it, or possibly you can see them. Usually they're the shiniest spot of the whole surface usually, and that indicates that that's high. You might have to dress it down with a stone. I don't see nothing here, so I'll carefully wipe all this down and get all the grit off of it. Of course, if you drop it, then you know you probably put a burr on it, and you're going to want to go over it and just kind of lightly make sure there ain't nothing stuck to it. Okay, now this is the bar that goes through the main of the block, and that's what's going to center, the fixture is going to center up on that. It's got a little bit of an edge on each side of it. You want to run your hand across that and make sure there ain't no burrs on that. That's going to sit in the housing board, and if there's a burr, it ain't going to set flat. And another thing is, if it's got a burr on it, it'll nick the housing board. It'll put a mark in the housing board if you're not careful. So once the block is sitting on this, you're going to have an option on this cradle of this position for the flat bar or this one, and that just depends on what block it is. If you've got a block that's got a skirt on it, then you're going to use a different setting for it. You know, like a Chrysler or a 292, an old 440, or anything that has a higher oil rail. Some of the LS's, they're a little different, but anyways, that's where we are on that. We'll get the block on it and we'll go from there. Okay, we're ready to set the 360 on the Rottler cradle. And I've made sure that my oil pan rails are clean, burr-free, clean. Everything's clean so we can set her down. There's no plugs or anything on the side of the block. We want this to be the highest point of the block when we set it on the fixture. We'll let her down slowly. Okay, so we want to make sure that all our caps are clear and nothing's binding, and that's good, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Now I'll show you the flat bar only centers the block. It doesn't hold the block off the cradle. It doesn't do nothing other than center her through the saddles of the housing boards. This has got a notch in it, and that's if the seal housing is smaller than the housing bore. I always put this in the back regardless, even if it needs it or not. So we're gonna eye it up, and the bottom one is going to be the one. Like I said, I said an edge, but there's actually an angle broke on this. You want to make sure that it's free and clear, and then just slide her in. Okay, and then I always push it in there and slide this back. Okay, so we're right there. If you're in question, if you're on this bar on the bottom of the housing boards, you can take a real thin feeler gauge and put your hands down in the cylinders and see if you can slide a piece of feeler gauge through there. If you can't, you're all the way down. So we'll take this off. Get you up a little higher here. Yeah, we're good. So we're going to put the lift bar that I have for this. You're going to, on engines that have flat valley china walls on the valleys, it's not a big deal. You got to be careful with Pontiacs because they got a sloping valley tray that goes in there, and this, somebody cut it out, but you got to be careful that it registers properly, or you'll be fighting with that. Okay, so I draw that all up. I should be able to lift it and put it in the machine. So we have the engine on the Rottler. It's sitting on the cradle. The cradle's sitting on the machine. It's sitting on there, but if you look at it, it's not setting straight. And when I meant putting a feeler gauge down and checking the bar to make sure it's registered on the housing bores, that's when it's on the machine. Obviously the hold downs will be clamping on the deck, and when everything's clamped down, you should be able to have no clearance there. Obviously there's a way that I do it that assures that is completely seated, but just for a visual and you're unsure, that's one quick way. Now, what I normally do is I take my kneecap and I put it in that cylinder hole like this. And the block is going to come down. You hear it. Probably couldn't see it because I was in the way, but it came down. The reason why I put my kneecap in there like that, because that bar, even though it has an edge broke on it, an angle broke on it, said it again, it'll still dent the housing bores. If this thing slams on the bar, it'll put a line in the housing bore. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't look too professional. Okay, so I'm going to slide the block back. And I guess if anybody's got any questions, of course, the flat bar is smaller than most all housing bores. And of course, being the diameter of the housing bore is bigger, the block's going to slide up and down on it. So it only registers on one side of the bar when it's sitting on the machine to bore the one bank, if that makes any sense. We have to adjust these arms up. Yep, here I'll put them on there. I didn't address this, but I'm going to do it really quick just in case somebody's wondering. These are risers, and them I set on the base of the machine, and them are for anything like a 4-cylinder, inline, 6, little engine Harley Davidsons. I've got a faceplate that I put across the risers and I clamp down onto it. But there's different risers. I've got different heights for setting up to get it as close up to the bar so we're not traveling too far down with it. I've got them in my other machines right now. There's a couple different styles. And if you don't have any, and you know somebody that has a grinder that can surface grind, you can get some heavy wall tubing and just have them face it for you. You could rough it in with a shell mill on your mill, and you might be able to get close enough and you can have them finish ground or just shell mill them. But I thought I'd mention that. Okay, I have the engine up on the cradle. It's up on the Rottler boring bar. I want to talk about this for a moment. I'm going off of this angle here and cutting the deck on most all the engines I do. So through the center line and the cam line, I'm square, where I could be this way or that way. So that's why I don't use the oil pan rail. I think I talked about this in another video, but the oil pan rails can be like this, or they can be actually slanted inward. I just thought I'd mention that once I use this, I want to put the cylinder bores, referencing off of my deck. If the deck's crooked, as you can see, this one was 2000s, not a lot, but I've seen them more. You're going to put your bores in your block crooked on one side to the other. That's why I use this. Now, if you got a CNC machine, I guess we don't have to talk about this because, obviously you're not going to be watching my videos. You've got more money tied up in equipment than I do. But if you don't have that kind of equipment, then you have to buy a fixture or go through a lot of trouble to really find where everything is. And this fixture saves a lot of that time. So we'll get over here on the machine. So what I'm going to try to do is explain this to you, and then I will show you. But as you can see, what I was saying about the flat bar is it's all the way up against this side. And this side should be, flat straight across, unless the seal area is right in up on the bar, and there's a notch in the bar right there. You can see it. And when in doubt, always just put the notch towards the seal surface. And, if it's crooked, I'll show you a way to really find out really fast. Now, if you look, we're on the oil pan rail. Well, my fixture takes this consideration, these 2 points, and makes it a reality to the deck. I don't care if the oil pan is on crooked. If the oil pan's on crooked 3, 4, 5 thousandths, it ain't going to make a difference. I want my cylinder bore square to my deck surface. So now that I've went through all the trouble of making sure that I'm square through the center line of my camshaft and my crank, I most certainly want to put my bores square to the deck. So I'm going to sweep the deck, and I'll show you how I do that. And it's pretty simple, and then that probably will be it on this. As far as how I sweep things, I have a little sterret, and I have an old tool holder that I put a round piece of steel in, and I've talked about this before in another video. And if I'm wondering if I'm relative to here to here, let's call that 9 and 3 and 12 and 6. We'll sweep half the distance here to here. That'll tell us where we are here. Well, under here we can shim, and I use feeler gauges. You can put feeler gauges in the front, so if you need to move it one way or the other, you just shim it. And I think I've probably done a couple videos on that, but this is probably the first time I'll address it all in one. And then I always used a dial indicator on the original hole in center of the machine, because these fingers are fine, but I think these fingers are within 2 thousandths. And I like to, and I just bump the machine, put it in a neutral position, and just tap the head one way or the other to find the perfect center line of the bore, and then I lock it down, which would be in the clamp position, and then run the bar. And if you look through some of my older videos, that I think this is going to probably be the last bit of the video here. I'm going to try to get you in as close as I can without bumping and banging you around here. So we're going to sweep the top of the deck, and what the sweeping of the top of the deck is going to assure us is it's going to assure us that all the time we spent on the BHJ fixture true decking this block, we want to make sure that we're putting the bores true to the deck. That's it. Now, when I bore it, I'll use that indicator to find the center of the bore. Right now, I've used the fingers on the bottom of the bore to spread out and to find the center so I can sweep it and my gauge don't fall into the hole or whatever, a head bolt hole. So we're going to sweep it. And we're going to move the head. Okay, so we're 0. Right there. I think you can see it. We're going to come around. You're not going to be able to see it, probably. But when you come around here on the gauge with the mirror, we're 0. So, and if you can't see it, you'll just have to take my word for it. It is 0. So we know that the block is setting in the cradle this way. I've never had to shim them. They always, after I true deck them, at least I know my mill from the first hole to the last hole. I'm good this way. Now, what dictates this angle is our oil pan rail and how relative it is to the fixture. Now, I can tell you that mine is off a little bit. So occasionally I'll have to shim one side because I know the center line of that blade that goes through the main, the flat bar that goes through the mains, is not sitting in the fixture 100% up and down. It's straight this way. I think it's off about 5 thousandths one side to the other. I've done 100 blocks plus in this thing, and it just seems to be that way. So now we're going to go around the back with our gauge, and that's the back. We'll take my mirror here, and the mirror says it's so close to 0 that it ain't funny. Let me get you off the tripod here without destroying everything. So it's saying, it's like, if you spin it slow, it'll say 1 thousandths. It's not drawing it in very good. There it goes, right there. There's about a half a thou. Like I'm going to worry about that on a deck. Nope, I'm not. So we know that it's 0 here and 0 here. So now we know we were on this side of this block, and we can center up on our cylinder holes. And I use the indicator, and I've got pictures of that when I do that. I'm not going to try to put it on this video because I'm going to push my luck and I won't be able to get all the content on the phone. So we know we're from front to back, to side, within less than 1/2 thousandths. That's pretty damn good. So, and then when I bore this side all out, of course, I'll do the other bank, and then I will put an indicator on the deck, sweep it, and go through the same thing and make sure that front to back it's square and side to side. But if it's not sitting on the fixture right, you're going to know, because if it's crooked, it's not going to set flat. So, but, you know, when in doubt, you can put a piece of feeler gauge, you know, like a 1.5 thou, and see if you can slip it between your first hole and your last hole in the bulkheads for the housing bore. I think we're going to call it a day on this. I think I covered everything I needed to. I hope you get something out of it. And if you didn't get something out of it, hang around. There should be something on that I'll be doing that's more interesting to you. But I just thought I'd cover this. It's a pretty damn easy machine to set up, and it does a fantastic job. I really can't complain about it. Thanks for watching.